Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video it's time to take a look at the best builds for every single marksman or AD carry so far in Preseason 11. One thing you should be aware of that I won't be mentioning when going over the core builds for all the AD carries is that Executioners is still a good purchase against heavy healing comps. You can pick it up early on, sit on it until later where you can upgrade it to Immortal Reminder for the majority of AD carries, and Chempunk Chainsword for AD carries like Ezreal, who benefit more from the extra AD Chempunk gives. Alright, so with that being said, let's jump into the core builds now, going in alphabetical order. So of course, starting with Felios. Felios has a couple different variations to his build at the moment. You can either go for a shield bow, a gale force, or a Kraken Slayer as your rush. It does seem like Immortal Shield Bow is performing the best at the moment so far. Kraken Slayer is going to be buffed in the upcoming patch years, so we might see that become a little bit more popular then. But Immortal Shield Bow into Hurricane and Infinity Edge is what's doing best on him at the moment. High elo, you do see a little bit more of Gale Force. Gale Force is the item there that does give you the dash, so it gives you a little bit more survivability. It allows for you to, have a little bit more outplay potential on the champion, so you can try Gale Force out as well. If you do just want, the highest DPS setup right now, Kraken Slayer, Runaan's Infinity Edge is going to be the one to go for. Now for Ashe, you do have a bit more diversity with her build paths. You can go Immortal Shield Bow into Runaan's Hurricane and Rage Blade. That is one of the most popular builds on her at the moment. It's really strong. A very underrated build is Gale Force into Blade of the Ruined King. That's going to give you a lot of mobility, a lot of kiting potential, and for a AD carry like Ashe who doesn't have a gap closer in her kit, having the active dash from Gale Force and then the extra move speed from Blade of the Ruined King allows for you to kite around really nicely in fights. And then you can also do Kraken Slayer, Ginsu's, and Hurricane if you're just looking for a full damage build to pump out the most DPS possible. On Caitlyn, she has two pretty good performing builds right now. Kraken Slayer into either a Stormrazor or Infinity Edge second, and then a Rapid Fire Cannon is the most standard. It's, one that you can't really go wrong with. Immortal Shield Bow into the Collector and Infinity Edge is a very underrated one. Collector as a second item on Caitlyn is performing so much better than any other second item on her at the moment. The synergy you have with that item and your ultimate, your ability to snipe with your ultimate when the enemy is low on HP, and you get the execute on the Collector there, so it just allows for you to finish off kills a lot easier with Caitlyn, and I definitely recommend trying out that item if you haven't already. So for Draven, you either have a crit build or a lethality build. You can go Immortal Shield Bow into Bloodthirster and then Infinity Edge if you want to play Draven crit. If you want to go lethality though, Eclipse into the Collector and Sanguine Blade is what you'd want to do. Now Eclipse has already been hotfix nerfed once, and it looks like it's going to get nerfed again for this upcoming patch, so if that does happen, Duskblade instead of Eclipse, you can also go for that as your first item there on Draven, so you can test that out too, either Duskblade or Eclipse into the Collector and then Sanguine Blade. Now moving on to Ezreal, his builds are pretty interesting here in preseason. There's the standard Manamune into Trinity Force and then Bork. That's the most popular. You can't really go wrong with that one, but it's actually not the best performing on him. Manamune into Divine Sunder and then Sorola's Grudge performs super well, and it's a really good tank busting build you can go for. And the Manamune into Trinity Force and Ravenous Hydra, this is actually his best performing core build at the moment in preseason. Ravenous Hydra is great on Ezreal now. You're getting a lot of AD from the item. You're getting 20 ability haste, you're getting Omni Vamp as well, and with this setup here, Manamune, Trinity Force, and Ravenous Hydra, you're getting a ton of ability haste from the setup there, which is great on Ezreal, and it's just very underrated at the moment. So if you haven't tried out Ravenous Hydra third, I definitely recommend it on your Ezreal. And then I guess I should note as well that Deathdance, it's not terrible as a third item on Ezreal. It's definitely still completely viable. I just don't have it up on screen there in any of the build paths. But if you are up against a heavy assassin comp, if the enemy team does have a lot of AD dive champions, then Deathdance as your third item is still completely viable. Now for Graves, you can go for either lethality or crit on him right now. Lethality does tend to perform a little bit better, going for Eclipse into the Collector, and then Bloodthirster is one of his most popular and most successful builds right now in preseason. You can also do Duskblade, Youmuu's, and Edge of Night, just a full-on lethality setup there. And then there's the crit one where you go Immortal Shield Bow into Bloodthirster and then Infinity Edge. On Jin, you have 3 different really good builds at the moment. You got Eclipse into the Collector and Youmuu's as your lethality setup there. So if you're up against a very squishy enemy composition, that's going to be your best build for him. Going for a crit though, if you're up against a tankier comp, Gale Force into Stormrazor and Rapid Fire Cannon is his best performing crit build right now. And then Immortal Shield Bow into Rapid Fire Cannon and Stormrazor is going to be good for you if it's difficult for you to enter fights. If the enemy comp does have a ton of assassins just trying to dive on top of you, then the shield from Shield Bow and the extra range for Rapid Fire Cannon earlier on there is going to suit you very well. On the Jinx, it's pretty simple for her, honestly. Runaan's and Infinity Edge as your second and third items. There's nothing really better on Jinx right now. It's only really your rush item that you can look to swap around, so it's kind of personal preference. It kind of does come down to the game. Shield Bow against dive champions, against assassins. Gale Force if you want some more outplay potential or you want some more early kill threat in the laning phase. If you're playing with a good aggressive support, then the extra, the dash there along with the execute on Gale Force allows for you to have a little bit more kill threat early on. And then Kraken Slayer into Runaan's Hurricane and Infinity Edge. That's going to be just your full DPS build on Jinx, your highest potential damage output. So 3 different options you can go for on Jinx. Now moving on to Kaisa, she has some of the most interesting builds here in the preseason. There's so many different builds you can go on Kaisa right now. Kraken Slayer as your rush there seems to be pretty standard for most of her crit builds. Some people are doing Manamune into Kraken, but just overall, Manamune isn't really doing that great on Kaisa anymore, so I didn't include it in any of her best builds right here. Kraken Slayer, Hurricane, and Ginsu's is the most popular at the moment, and it is pretty strong. Kraken into Hurricane and then Quick Blades though is very underrated, and this is actually her best performing build at the moment. Quick Blade synergy with Kaisa's kit is extremely good, so look to try out that build there if you haven't already. Kraken into Bork and then Black Cleaver is also super underrated, really good tank busting build there. And then if you do want to play here, this lethality AP setup, Duskblade into Nashor's Tooth and then Zhonya's is a really good build as well. And then for Kalista right now, Immortal Shield Bow into Hurricane and then Rageblade, or you can swap around, when you go Hurricane and Rageblade. If you think you're going to be team fighting pretty early on there, then Hurricane is going to be really strong for you second. If it doesn't look like you're going to be team fighting, then you can just go Rageblade to give yourself some more single target power there. Kraken Slayer isn't bad as a rush item either. You can go for that if you just want a full damage setup, but Immortal Shield Bow is what's doing best right now on Kalista. Now for the Kindred, you can try out 3 different builds on them. Kraken Slayer into Stormrazor and then Infinity Edge is the most popular right now. It's pretty strong. You can also do a Shield Bow into Hurricane and then Infinity Edge, and the best performing build right now in high elo on Kindred is Gale Force into Stormrazor and then Fire Cannon. You got a lot of burst potential with that build there, along with a lot of outplay potential, so you can look to try out either of those 3 builds on your Kindred. Now for Kogmaw, he can do very well with really any mythic as your rush item. Kraken Slayer, Ginsu's, and Hurricane is going to be max DPS. Shield Bow is going to give you a little bit more survivability there with Ginsu's and Blade the Ruined King. The Gale Force is going to give you a bit more survivability too, a little bit more outplay potential with the Ginsu's and the Hurricane. And then you can even do just a Bork Rush into Rageblade and Hurricane without a mythic at all. That build actually does perform very well right now on Kogmaw, so you can try any of those 4 builds out on him. On Lucian, either Shield Bow or Kraken Slayer can work as a rush item. If you're up against a super tanky enemy comp, then the true damage from Kraken Slayer is going to be really nice. If you're up against more assassins though, you can go Shield Bow for the survivability. Essence Reaver and Quick Blades, really good second and third on him. You don't really want to swap anything around there, so it's pretty simple for your builds on Lucian. And then for Misfortune, if you want to go lethality, Eclipse the Collector and Edge of Night is very strong. You can do a crit setup too of Immortal Shield Bow into Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge. It just kind of does depend on the enemy comp, so against more squishies, go lethality, against more tanks, go for crit. And then you can do kind of a hybrid mix of crit and lethality, going for Gale Force as a rush into the Collector and then Bloodthirster. This is going to give you a lot of burst potential there and a little bit more outplay potential, a bit more survivability with the dash from Gale Force. And then for Quinn, her builds are actually super fun right now in preseason. You can either do a lethality setup, a crit, or a bit of a hybrid. So for lethality, you go Eclipse, Sanguine Blade, and the Collector. For crit, Shield Bow, Stormrazor, and then Infinity Edge. And then for the hybrid, Sanguine into Kraken Slayer is actually the most popular build right now on the Quinn, and it just makes your 1v1 insanely good. There's so much attack speed, so much burst potential from those 2 items on the Quinn, so look to try out any of those 3. On Samira, you do have a couple different options at the moment. Shield Bow into Bloodthirster and then Infinity Edge is pretty standard, just lots of lifesteal from that setup, great synergy with Samira's kit. You can also do the Collector as your second item, that one's performing super well on her, and then a Gale Force into the Collector and Bloodthirster. That's the exact same one I recommended for Misfortune, and this is one that just allows you to play super aggressively, like a lot of burst potential from Gale Force and the Collector. So if you're snowballing super hard in the early game, if you're playing with an aggressive support, then this build is just going to give you so much burst potential. Now moving on to Senna, for your rush item, it's going to stay pretty consistent with the Manamune, but second and third item can really change depending on personal preference and depending on the game. So an Eclipse into Rapid Fire Cannon is a very strong build on her right now. It gives you a bit of lethality there, and from the Rapid Fire Cannon, a little bit more range, a bit more survivability. If you do want to just go for a full lethality setup, you can do Dustblade into the Collector. With Eclipse getting nerfed in this coming patch here, and with it already getting hotfix nerfed, Dustblade is going to become a lot stronger, and this is going to be a very good build on Senna, especially for next patch. And then you can even do a Divine Sunder into Navori Quick Blades. This is a very underrated setup right now on the Senna, does perform extremely well, so there's a lot of different things you can try on your Senna for preseason. On the Sivir, Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge as your second and third items seem to be pretty consistent on the champion right now. It's just the rush item you can look to swap around. So Gale Force into Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge is your best performing setup, but you can do a Kraken Slayer into Essence Reaver, and the Collector as well as a third item is something pretty underrated right now on Sivir you can look to try out. So you can also do a Shield Bow, Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge if you do want a bit more survivability. And then for Tristana, you can try out 3 different builds on her. Kraken Slayer into Stormrazor and Infinity Edge is pretty popular right now. It's just a ton of damage. It's going to be a very offensive setup for you. Immortal Shield Bow into Stormrazor and Rapid Fire Cannon is going to be the more defensive one. You got more survivability with that. And then Gale Force into Phantom Dancer is super underrated with the dash from Gale Force. A lot of outplay potential there. Phantom Dancer combined with Gale Force makes your 1v1 super strong. So you can look to try out any of those 3 on Tristana. On Twitch, there's a bunch of really good builds on him. You can do a Gale Force into Hurricane and Infinity Edge. That is his best performing setup at the moment. Shield Bow into Hurricane and Infinity Edge is also really good. You do have the shield from Shield Bow, so if you're up against, a lot of assassins, you can look to take that one. Kraken Slayer, Hurricane, and then Rageblade as a third item is really good on him too. Rageblade is very underrated right now as a third item on Twitch. And then you could do actually AP Twitch right now. Nashor's Tooth into Night Harvester, and then Deathcap is a really fun setup on Twitch at the moment. It's actually pretty strong as well, so you can look to try that out if you do want to play like a new kind of fun build for the preseason. For Varus, you can look to try out 2 build paths on him. If you want a really offensive, just super high DPS build, you can do Kraken Slayer, Ginsu's, and Blade of the Ruined King. And if you want more of a defensive build, if you want more of a team fight build there, you can do Immortal Shield Bow into Ginsu's and Hurricane. And then Vayne is very similar to Varus, except for you don't go Hurricane on Vayne. So Kraken Slayer, Ginsu, and Bork, great on her too. And then Shield Bow, Bork, and Rageblade if you do want more survivability there. Going for Shield Bow with the shield and then taking Bork second to give you some more move speed, some more kiting potential can work better if you're up against, more assassins or if you're up against a lot of dive champions. So 2 different builds you can go there depending on the situation. And then lastly here to round things out for the Xayah, Essence Reaver into Navori Quick Blades is super strong on her right now. The synergy between those 2 items is great because they both provide you with haste and crit. With Navori Quick Blades, reducing the cooldown of your basic abilities whenever you crit is great for Xayah in the mid to late game because you pretty much have permanent uptime on your W, and it allows for you to just pump out a ton of DPS. For your first item, you can either go Shield Bow, Gale Force, or Kraken Slayer, and you can try out that build there as well on the right of Kraken Slayer into Quick Blades and then Phantom Dancer. You got a ton of attack speed from that build, a lot of crit, and just a lot of DPS potential in mid to late game fights. Alright, so that is going to be it, guys. That's all for the video. Those were the best builds for all the AD carries in the preseason so far. So if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.